So I just read a book that's going immediately on my stack of favorite books I've read of all time, which actually is right there. That's my stack of favorites, favorites of favorites. But I just finished this book. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. And I absolutely loved it. It does exactly as the title suggests. He explores what it takes to become a master, and he does it through the study of dozens and dozens of some of history's masters of all types: artists, entrepreneurs, scientists, inventors. And Robert Greene's great, by the way. If you haven't read or listened to him, he's got this just like this most studious pursuit of understanding human nature and culture and things like that. But I picked this book up because on the tails of finishing a book earlier this year that really also changed my life, called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, I picked this one up because it was about the craft. And with my work on comma here, I view it as a craft. And this is a craft that I want to pursue and continue to get better at for an incredibly long time. And I'd heard amazing things about this book. So I wanted to see what I could learn from it and what it could teach me about where I'm going and what I can do with comma here. And what I did is, as I was going through the book, I started doing this thing where, not only will I underline, which I've kind of always done, but I'll fold the corner of the page down. And on each of these pages that I fold down, I'll have quotes or things that really stood out to me. And on the corner of the page that I fold down, I'll write down a word or a couple words. This one says experimentation. This one says humility. This one says intuition. And the reason I've done that is because I can go back through and immediately go to those parts that speak on a topic that I want to go learn more about. And I really love doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. But what I wanted to do here was come back and share with you some of the things that really stood out to me. I just flipped through it again over the last day or so here, and picked out some of the key topics and quotes that I pulled out that I just found were really, really powerful. And I wanted to remember both myself, but I also wanted to give them to you, see if you thought they might be interesting. So the book covers three main ideas. And so what Robert really speaks to and what he learned is that to become a master, there are three stages. The first is an apprenticeship. The second is what he calls the creative active phase. And then the third is mastery. And so these quotes will kind of follow each of those topics. The key insight for me really is that you find your life's work. And there's a quote here on that. We'll get to that. Look inward to find who you are and what is unique about you and your life's work, which is a topic that I'm obsessed with, and you've heard it here before. Then you find an apprentice. You become an apprentice and you find a mentor in that work, in that line of work. And he really emphasizes this idea that we always want to find a shortcut. But one thing I've learned is that it's really just time in and doing the craft that is what's going to bring you closer to mastery. And so that's part of the reason why I'm so obsessed with this idea of life's work, because really it's your life's work is the one that's going to feel most easeful. It's the one that you're going to enjoy the most. And that's what I'm in search of myself. And so this idea that it really is a lifetime and a life's work that gives you the best chance of getting to mastery. And it'll be the one that's the most rewarding because it's the most expressive of who you are at your core. That's the idea that that's really stood out to me. So go inward to yourself, find what makes you you and what really makes you tick. Find a mentor and become an apprentice. Spend time learning from that person. Be willing to be humble and learn from them over a period of time. But become creative, become active, and start to play with your own ideas. See what you learn from your mentor that fits. See what doesn't. Try new things, experiment. At some point, you'll branch out, you'll step out on your own, and then you continue to build. This is the practicing of the craft, and it's through what you've learned from those mentors and from learning everything you can about the world and the other people that do the craft and the craft itself, combined with just a dedication to the craft yourself and experimentation. And that's what brings you to mastery. So to start, I just wanted to lay out the arc of the book and some of the ideas that he talked about, because you'll see that these excerpts that really stood out to me fell kind of along that path. So the first topic I want to talk about here, I titled Life's Task and Deep Inclinations. And so what I'll do is I'll read some of these quotes along the way just to share them with you. He writes, "The primal uniqueness naturally wants to assert and express itself, but some experience it more strongly than others. With masters, it is so strong that it feels like something that has its own external reality, a force, a voice, a destiny. In moments when we engage in an activity that corresponds to our deepest inclinations, we might experience a touch of this. We feel as if the words we write or the physical movements we perform come so quickly and easily that they are coming from outside us. We are literally inspired, the Latin word meaning something from the outside breathing within us." As an aside, I love that. I've written about it a couple of times, but that idea that inspiration comes from the roots of the word meaning something being breathed into us, life, wisdom, insight being breathed into us. Now back to the quote. "Let us state it in the following way. At your birth, a seed is planted. That seed is your uniqueness. It wants to grow, transform itself, and flower to its full potential. It has a natural, assertive energy to it. Your life's task is to bring that seed to flower, to express your uniqueness through your work. You have a destiny to fulfill. The stronger you feel and maintain it, as a force, a voice, or in whatever form, the greater your chance for fulfilling this life's task and achieving mastery. What weakens this force, what makes you not feel it or even doubt its existence, is the degree to which you have succumbed to another life force, social pressures to conform. This counterforce can be very powerful. You want to fit into a group. Unconsciously, you might feel that what makes you different is embarrassing or painful. Your parents often act as a counterforce as well. They may seek to direct you to a career path that is lucrative and comfortable. If these counterforces become strong enough, you can lose complete contact with your uniqueness, with who you really are. Your inclinations and desires become modeled on those of others." This I just resonate so deeply with. It's the idea that we can end up on paths that aren't the ones that are right for us, that it takes courage to do the thing that is most expressive to ourselves, even if it seems counterintuitive. So he speaks to the importance of finding who we are. I love how he says it. The idea that there's a seed inside us, and the seed is actually our uniqueness, and then it's our job to grow and transform it. Now, the second one's getting into this idea of apprenticeship. I wrote apprenticeship equals transformation. He writes, "The principle is simple and must be engraved deeply in your mind. The goal of an apprenticeship is not money, a good position, a title, or a diploma, but rather the transformation of your mind and character, the first transformation on the way to mastery. You enter a career as an outsider. You are naive and full of misconceptions about this new world. Your head is full of dreams and fantasies about the future. Your knowledge of the world is subjective, based on emotions, insecurities, and limited experience. Slowly, you will ground yourself in reality, in the objective world represented by the knowledge and skills that make people successful in it. You will learn how to work with others and handle criticism. In the process, you will transform yourself from someone who is impatient and scattered into someone who is disciplined and focused, with a mind that can handle complexity. In the end, you will master yourself and all of your weaknesses. This has a simple consequence. You must choose places of work and positions that offer the greatest possibilities for learning. Practical knowledge is the ultimate commodity and is what will pay you dividends for decades to come, far more than the paltry increase in pay you might receive at some seemingly lucrative position that offers fewer learning opportunities. This means that you move toward challenges that will toughen and improve you, where you will get the most objective feedback on your performance and progress. You do not choose apprenticeships that seem easy and comfortable. So this is it. This is about selecting apprenticeships, finding the thing that will optimize for learning and for nothing else, to plant these seeds, to foster the seed that's planted within us, to really root down and build those robust roots. The next one, modern apprenticeship to self-discovery. Each age tends to create a model of apprenticeship that is suited to the system of production that prevails at the time. In the Middle Ages, during the birth of modern capitalism and the need for quality control, the first apprenticeship system appeared with its rigidly defined terms. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, this model of apprenticeship became largely outmoded, but the idea behind it lived on in the form of self-apprenticeship, developing yourself from within a particular field, as Darwin did in biology. This suited the growing individualistic spirit of the time. We are now in the computer age, with computers dominating nearly all aspects of commercial life. Although there are many ways in which this could influence the concept of apprenticeship, it is the hacker approach to programming that may offer the most promising model for this new age. The model goes like this. You want to learn as many skills as possible, following the direction that circumstances lead you to, but only if they are related to your deepest interests. Like a hacker, you value the process of self-discovery and making things that are of the highest quality. You avoid the trap of following one set career path. You are not sure where this will all lead, but you are taking full advantage of the openness of information, all of the knowledge about skills now at your disposal. You see what kind of work suits you and what you want to avoid at all costs. You move by trial and error. This is how you pass your 20s. You are the programmer of this wide-ranging apprenticeship within the loose constraints of your personal interests. You are not wandering about because you are afraid of commitment, but because you are expanding your skill base and your possibilities. At a certain point, when you are ready to settle on something, ideas and opportunities will inevitably present themselves to you. When that happens, all of the skills you have accumulated will prove invaluable. You will be the master at combining them in ways that are unique and suited to your individuality. In this new age, those who follow a rigid, singular path in their youth often find themselves in a career dead end in their 40s or overwhelmed with boredom. This wide-ranging apprenticeship of your 20s will yield the opposite, expanding possibilities as you get older. So this idea that it's not just one size fits all apprenticeship. It changes in each time, and he sheds light on our experience. Maybe you have the same one as certainly mine, that these rigid paths, they, at least for me, they just didn't seem to fit. And so he speaks to this idea of searching for your path and of starting to build your own. And you learn and you hack and you try. The cost of trial is lower than it's ever been. I mean, the risk to trying something new these days is not what it used to be. And so I like the idea of like changing how we think about the path that we take and what we do to fit with the times, in the world that surrounds us. The next, a creative way of being. He brings this idea of the dimensional mind up, and I wrote dimensional mind equals discipline plus childlike spirit. Retaining a memory of this original mind, he's speaking to the infant worldview where everything is new and we're sort of like untainted by the world and what's put on us. Retaining a memory of this original mind, we cannot help but feel nostalgia for the intensity with which we used to experience the world. As the years pass, this intensity inevitably diminishes. We begin to see the world through a screen of words and opinions. Our prior experiences, layered over the present, color what we see. We no longer look at things as they are, noticing their details, or wonder why they exist. Our minds gradually tighten up. We become defensive about the world we now take for granted, and we become upset if our beliefs or assumptions are attacked. We can call this way of thinking the conventional mind. Under pressure to make a living and conform to society, we force our minds into tighter and tighter grooves. We may seek to retain the spirit of childhood here and there, playing games or participating in forms of entertainment that release us from the conventional mind. Sometimes, when we visit a different country where we cannot rely upon everything being familiar, we become childlike again, struck by the oddness and newness of what we are seeing. But because our minds are not completely engaged in these activities, because they last only a short while, they are not rewarding in a deep sense. They are not creative. Masters and those who display a high level of creative energy are simply people who manage to retain a sizable portion of their childhood spirit despite the pressures and demands of adulthood. This spirit must manifest itself in their work and in their ways of thinking. They actively transform everything around them, play with ideas and circumstances, and surprise us with the novel things they say or do. But the natural creativity of children is limited. It never leads to discoveries, inventions, or substantial works of art. Masters not only retain the spirit of the original mind, but they add to it their years of apprenticeship and an ability to focus deeply on problems or ideas. This leads to high-level creativity. Although they have profound knowledge of a subject, their minds remain open to alternative ways of seeing and approaching problems. They are able to ask the kinds of simple questions that most people pass over, but they have the rigor and discipline to follow their investigations all the way to the end. They retain a childlike excitement about their field and a playful approach, all of which makes the hours of hard work alive and pleasurable. Like children, they are capable of thinking beyond words, visually, spatially, intuitively, and have greater access to pre-verbal and unconscious forms of mental activity, all of which can account for their surprising ideas and creations. This is awesome. Masters manage to blend the two, discipline and a childlike spirit, together in what we shall call the dimensional mind. Such a mind is not constricted by limited experience or habits. It can branch out into all directions and make deep contact with reality. It can explore more dimensions of the world. The conventional mind is passive. It consumes information and regurgitates it in familiar forms. The dimensional mind is active, transforming everything it digests into something new and original, creating instead of consuming. And you could probably tell why I love this so much. I mean, it's hitting on so many of these experiences that I'm seeking to understand in my own life. Like this idea that as we live, we get indoctrinated or we get exposed to new things and our mind begins to adopt external ways of viewing the world or external values or external goals. And we start to take what's inside of us and sort of paper over with what the world around us gives us. And this idea that if we can go back and uncover some of that childlike spirit, the playful, what he calls the original mind, what Boyd Vardy calls the wild self, what's inside of us inherently. This, I think about my tuition, something that I used to not have access to or think I didn't, right? And I've been working to uncover it because this idea that like it makes us feel good in our bodies, and that actually is the source of creativity. But also the idea that it's not just a purely creative and sort of like fully unabashed expression of that childlike side of ourselves, but that it's paired with what we learn as we mature and we grow and we gain discipline and we bring some of that intellect and that insight to combine with our intuition to lead us in that direction. If we do that, it's creating is what our contribution to the world is, not simply consuming. There's then this part where he talks about the limitations of language. And again, this is something that I've bumped up against all the time here during my work with comma. Some of the most important things are the most difficult to describe. And he hits on this here, so I want to read this to you. With the invention of language, the intellectual powers of our ancestors were vastly enhanced. Thinking in words, they could imagine more possibilities in the world around them, which they could then communicate and act on. The human brain thus developed along these evolutionary lines as a multi-use, immensely flexible instrument that is able to think on various levels, combining many forms of intelligence with all of the senses. But over time, as our ability to think in words increased, we slowly lost our previous mental powers and became largely dependent on words for our thinking. In the process, we lost our connection to the senses, sight, smell, touch, that once played such a vital role in our intelligence. Language is a system largely designed for social communication. It is based on conventions that everyone can agree upon. It is somewhat rigid and stable so that it allows us to communicate with minimum friction. But when it comes to the incredible complexity and fluidity of life, it can often fail us. Linguists have enumerated the high number of concepts that have no particular word to describe them in the English language. If there are no words for certain concepts, we tend not to think of them. And so language is a tool that is often too tight and constricting compared to the multi-layered powers of intelligence we naturally possess. I love this idea. It's one that I've toyed with. It's like, how can we get back to access these older, more complex, and maybe even more intelligent wisdom, the access to wisdom that we have, that we evolved with over millions and millions of years. And again, Boyd Vardy talks about this. I love his ideas that we have an animal self and a social self. And this animal, this wild self, is that side of us that is embodied. It's in us. It's what we feel. It's our intuition. It's how we interact with the natural world. And the social self, which we need and is useful, but these days, like, it's often overdone. We go too far into the verbal, intellectual. I certainly relate to that. Sometimes, often, I just get stuck above the neck, as they call it, and just in my head and detached from the body. And my journey, my search of more aliveness, again, it inspired a lot by a lot of what Boyd is talking about, is back into the body. It's into the intuition. It's into paying attention to where the energy, when we do something or talk to somebody or go to a place, what happens inside of us? Is it expansive and energetic and exciting, or is it energy draining and sort of constricting? So I love that he hits on this, and you'll see as we get further on, he'll talk about how these other types of intelligences blend with our intuition. In fact, the next section I want to talk about here, he talks about the Tao. The Tao Te Ching is a book that talks about this idea, but he talks about the Tao, and I also wrote The Way, Intuition. This unseen element that constitutes the animal's entire experience and that makes battle a fluid, organic entity can be called various things. To the ancient Chinese, who understood this very well, it was known as the Tao, or Way. And this Way inhabits everything in the world and is embedded in the relationships between things. The Way is visible to the expert in cooking, carpentry, warfare, or philosophy. We shall call it the dynamic, the living force that inevitably operates in anything we study or do. It is how the whole thing functions and how the relationships evolve from within. It is not the moves of the pieces on the chessboard, but the entire game, involving the psychology of the players, their strategies in real time, their past experiences influencing the present, the comfort of the chairs they're sitting in, how their energies affect each other. In a word, everything that comes into play all at once. Through intense absorption in a particular field over a long period of time, masters come to understand all of the parts involved in what they are studying. They reach a point where all of this has become internalized, and they're no longer seeing the parts, but gain an intuitive feel for the whole. They literally see or sense the dynamic. It would be a misconception, however, to imagine that masters are simply following their intuitions and moving beyond rational thinking. First, it is through all of their hard work, the depth of their knowledge, and the development of their analytical skills that they reach this higher form of intelligence. Second, when they experience this intuition or insight, they invariably subject it to a high degree of reflection and reasoning. In science, they must spend months or years verifying their intuitions. In the arts, they must work out the ideas that come to them intuitively and rationally shape them into a form. This is hard for us to imagine because we find intuition and rationality mutually exclusive. But in fact, at this high level, they operate together in a seamless fashion. The reasoning of masters is guided by intuition. Their intuition springs from intense rational focus. The two are fused. So again, yeah, all these are really starting to come together as we work towards mastery, as we become creative and we fuse this creative, embodied, energetic side and the intellectual, the rational. As we fuse those together, they each make each other better. It's just like when we learned how to drive, right? The first time we hop behind the wheel of a car, we're thinking about every single thing. We're going from a dead stop, we're hitting the gas, we come up to a corner, we have to think about turning the blinker on and then turning it back off. But then the more and more we get used to it, we don't even think about these things anymore. It becomes, as we often say, it becomes intuitive. And so Robert here is pointing out this phenomenon that as we continue to work and spend the time and dedicate to this craft over time, we get plugged into this other form of intelligence. We can see the entirety, the whole system, and the whole dynamic, as he calls it, at once. And now on to complexity. Complexity, learning, and anxiety. What happens to many of us when faced with such complexity, he's talking about the complexity of life and of becoming a master. What happens to many of us when faced with such complexity is that we feel subtly discouraged before we even try anything. More and more people in this overheated environment will be tempted to opt out. They will develop a greater taste for ease and comfort. They will increasingly rely on simplified ideas of reality and conventional ways of thinking. They will fall prey to seductive formulas that offer quick and easy knowledge. They will lose a taste for developing skills that require time and a resilient ego. It can hurt our self-esteem in the initial phases of learning a skill, as we are made so aware of our awkwardness. Such people will rail against the world and blame others for their problems. They will find political justifications for opting out, when in truth they simply cannot handle the challenges of engaging with complexity. In trying to simplify their mental lives, they disconnect themselves from reality and neutralize all of the powers developed by the human brain over so many millions of years. This desire for what is simple and easy infects all of us, often in ways we are mostly unaware of. The only solution is the following. We must learn to quiet the anxiety we feel whenever we are confronted with anything that seems complex or chaotic. In our journey from apprenticeship to mastery, we must patiently learn the various parts and skills that are required, never looking too far ahead. In moments of perceived crisis, we must develop the habit of maintaining our cool and never overreacting. If the situation is complex and others are reaching for simple black and white answers or for the usual conventional responses, we must make a point of resisting such temptation. We maintain our negative capability in a degree of detachment. What we are doing is gaining a tolerance and even a taste for chaotic moments, training ourselves to entertain several possibilities or solutions. We are learning to manage our anxiety, a key skill in these chaotic times. The world is getting crazier and crazier. I mean, it's all we think about. It's all you hear in the media. We were never evolved to be plugged into everything that's happening, particularly bad things all over the world, all at the same time in real time. So it is getting more chaotic. But because of that, what I take from that is that it's actually going to be an advantage, a competitive advantage, if we can learn to navigate that chaos a little bit better. I'm thinking right now, as we're talking about this, of these ideas of stoicism, these ideas that you can take what's right in front of you and that you should only take what's right in front of you, what you can control, because everything else is just anxiety inducing, and learning to quiet those and turn the attention and intention to what's right in front of us and the things that we can control is one tool that we can use to combat this anxiety and the complexity. It strikes me that the way the world is going is precisely the thing that will discourage people from attaining mastery. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And I'm also thinking again of how important it is to find the life's work that feels truly meaningful and energizing to us, because it's going to be difficult. And to the extent we can find something that is energizing to us, that feels authentic to us, that feels expressive of who we are at our core, it means that we'll be more able to do it better and longer, because as we're seeing, it's going to be a process. And at the end of the day, it's all about the process. And so if we can find that thing and commit to it, the better we'll be along the way. And on the idea of forging one's own path, Robert writes, and so inevitably, these masters, as they progress on their career paths, make a choice at a key moment in their lives. They decide to forge their own route, one that others will see as unconventional, but that suits their own spirit and rhythms and leads them closer to discovering the hidden truths of their objects of study. This key choice takes self-confidence and self-awareness, the X factor that is necessary for attaining mastery. I just had to throw that in there. It's my jam. It's what I'm thinking about. It's what I'm attempting to do. And it's what I hope to inspire others that have a desire to do. And here for the last one, he writes on mastery as a whole. Your false self is the accumulation of all the voices you have internalized from other people. Parents and friends who want you to conform to their ideas of what you should be like and what you should do, as well as societal pressures to adhere to certain values that can easily seduce you. It also includes the voice of your own ego, which constantly tries to protect you from unflattering truths. As you must know by now, these voices do not speak the truth. Mastery is not a question of genetics or luck, but of following your natural inclinations and the deep desire that stirs you from within. Everyone has such inclinations. This desire within you is not motivated by egotism or sheer ambition for power, both of which are emotions that get in the way of mastery. It is instead a deep expression of something natural, something that marked you at birth as unique. Your true self does not speak in words or banal phrases. Its voice comes from deep within you, from the substrata of your psyche, from something embedded physically within you. It emanates from your uniqueness, and it communicates through sensations and powerful desires that seem to transcend you. You cannot ultimately understand why you are drawn to certain activities or forms of knowledge. This cannot really be verbalized or explained. It is simply a fact of nature. In following this voice, you realize your own potential and satisfy your deepest longings to create and express your uniqueness. It exists for a purpose, and it is your life's task to bring it to fruition. I thought that was such a beautiful way to wrap up this exploration of what it is to live, but also to do work worth doing. And honestly, the fusing of the two, which is what I'm after. And I just love that. I love that. That's what I strive to do. It's what I believe in right now. And I so resonate with the struggle to explain it or to communicate it. It can't be explained. I don't know. I mean, I know why I'm doing this, but I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, why is this what energizes me? Why is this what I decided to give a shot and pursue? I don't know. It just is. It just is what energizes me. And it's reminding me of another concept that I just read in another book that I finished, the concept of grace, which is not a new concept, but in the book, The Road Less Traveled, which I think you'll see something from at some point, because again, it's going up on that shelf right there. It was such a powerful book. This idea of grace. So he comes at the human life from a more spiritual, religious perspective, and I'll save the whole lecture, but just the mere fact that exactly what Robert Greene was saying in the sentence, that we can't explain why we are who we are and why the things that we love are the things that we love, or the things that we find meaningful are the things that we find meaningful. We can try to put words to it, but ultimately that seed was in us somehow already. Or when we encountered something that planted it in us, we don't know why it did. But that to me that's the mystery, and I'm trying to understand it. But really what matters most to me is that I can take that thing inside of me and foster it. I want to see what's possible, because I think there's a chance that a lot more is possible if we live a life in the direction of that seed, those things that we can't explain, but that make us who we are, and the things that we love that we can't explain. I think there's a lot more possible than we're led to believe. And at the very least, it's something I want to see what's possible, because if we can build our lives in that way, if we can become masters at the craft that we find important and meaningful and fun and exciting, what a life, right? And we're here. We might as well make it as good as we can. So, Mastery by Robert Greene. This is the first of what may be many. Maybe I'll call it the Comma Book Club. I don't know. Obviously, I love books, as you can see behind me. And I want to share. I want to share what I'm learning. And if you like this, let me know. I'll do more of these. It's gotten dark outside. Wow, I kind of look like a ghost with this light here. But apologize for that. But I needed to get it out today. I don't know. I felt compelled. So, Mastery by Robert Greene. Some of the things that I learned, found interesting, and want to remind myself about as I continue to move forward. I hope it was interesting to you. And thanks as always for joining. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you soon.